Today we'll be talking about the paging and notification products that Cyberdata manufactures. I think it will be ideal to do another training in the future to cover specifically access controls and intercoms, because that's such an intensive topic, and I'm sure you all have other things to do besides sit in a 4-hour training seminar. So we can do another training maybe in a week or so to go over more of the access control and intercom based equipment. But today's focus will be on our paging and notification equipment. So for our product categories for paging and notification, we've got 3 main categories. We've got our IP to analog products that deal with interfacing an existing analog paging system, so an existing speaker system with a new VoIP phone system. We've also got IP notification products. So those are products specifically designed for notification. Things like a IP strobe, a call button would fall into that kind of category. And then finally, we've got IP paging, which are specifically IP-based paging products. So things like SIP speakers, outdoor horns, and loudspeaker amplifiers. So to begin with our first category, we've got the IP to analog category of products. And we've got three products in this category. We've got the SIP paging adapter, part number 011233, the SIP paging server, part number 011146, and the SIP paging zone controller, part number 011171. To start, we can start with the SIP paging adapter and the SIP paging server. They're the exact same hardware, but they have different software loaded on them. So all of the connection types are exactly the same for the 2 different products. So for the analog connections on the SIP paging adapter and the SIP paging server, there are 2 ways to connect to analog amplifiers. We've got a balanced tip and ring output, so that'll communicate and connect to what's known as a tel input on an amplifier. It's typically 2 to 3 wires that are used for the connection. The connection specifically is 800 ohm impedance. It's known as a low Z output impedance. And we've also got an unbalanced RCA output for more modern amplifiers that just take a regular RCA connection. And that one has a 10,000 ohm impedance. That's known as a high Z output. We've also got an RCA line in port on both the paging adapter and paging server, and this is useful for feeding in background music and other equipment to provide overhead music and other types of media during when the system is not being used for overhead pages. So if you're in a store, they could be playing music overhead, or at a school, or in a garden. They could just be playing music over the speaker system when they're not making voice notifications. The devices also have what's known as a fault sense input, and this input takes a relay contact closure from another device. So common use cases for that would be, say, a fire panel or an emergency alarm panel that, say, if someone pulls a fire alarm in a building, it would trip the fire alarm. And the fire alarm panel would connect to the SIP paging adapter or SIP paging server. And on that fire panel, it would have an onboard relay. And that onboard relay would be commonly known as a normally open, temporarily closed relay. And what that means is the relay is normally in the open state, and it will temporarily close. So when that connects to our device and the relay is closed, our device will sense that impedance change on the circuit and take an action. That action can be just playing a local audio file. So in that fire panel example, if a fire alarm is pulled, the panel will trigger its onboard relay, which connects to the paging adapter. The paging adapter knows when the fault sense input is triggered to play an audio message that warns of a fire, to tell people to calmly evacuate the building. Finally, there's an onboard relay on both the paging adapter and paging server, and that's used to tie into analog amplifiers to control the amplifier. There are certain amplifiers that you'll encounter out in the field that deal with background music, and multiple audio inputs on the amplifier itself. To signify a higher priority audio, the relay contact closure can be used, so when the paging adapter or paging server receives a call or multicast for the SIP paging adapter, it will close its onboard relays and tell the amplifier that a higher priority audio is incoming and to mute the music and play the incoming page. So it's a very useful tool to connect to different amplifiers, but it's not always required. So to go over the pinout connections on the paging adapter and the paging server, because again, they share the exact same hardware across both products, from left to right, we've got the ground strap right here, which is just a little screw that you'll attach to different grounding points in the network room. So that way the device is connected to earth ground and can be protected against electrical shock. We've got the reset to factory mode button. So this is a button to reset the device to factory mode in case you lose access to the device or the password is changed and you can no longer gain access to the device. It's a very easy way to reset the device to factory mode. Then we've got our RCA line in port, and that's where background music can come into the device and then be played out through the RCA line out port or the tip and ring connections here on the screw down terminal. So then we've got our RCA line out option, and this is used to connect to more modern amplifiers just using a standard RCA cable. It's more common with newer amplifiers, but there are some older amplifiers that you will encounter that have the RCA connection style. It really depends on the amplifier and when it was produced. So then when we get to the green screw down terminal here, we commonly refer to this as the page port terminal at Cyberdata. Going from left to right, we've got pins 1 and 2, which is the fault sense input we were talking about earlier. This is where you would connect the fire panel that would close and make the paging adapter or the paging server take an action. Then we've got pins 3, 4, and 5. These are our audio connections used for the tip and ring connection. This is the 600 ohm audio connection, and this is used with typically older amplifiers, but you will still see this connection used in modern amplifiers as well. With the two connection points, both the RCA line out connection and the tip and ring connection right here in the middle, you can connect to about 90% of amplifiers out on the market today. It's very, very versatile, and you can connect to just about anything with these. So specifically, pin 3 is our positive 600 ohm audio out. Pin 4 is our negative 600 ohm audio out, and then we've got the audio ground. In some connections, you will only use pins 3 and 4, just the positive and negative audio output, and on occasion, you will use pin 5 as well. So sometimes it will be only pins 3 and 4, sometimes it will be pins 3, 4, and 5. It really depends on the amplifier. And finally, we've got pins 6 and 7 here on the right-hand side, and these are the relay outputs of the paging adapter and the paging server. These are the ones that connect to the amplifier and signify a higher priority audio is coming through the amplifier. Finally, on our right-hand side, we've got our external power connection, which takes a standard 48-volt DC barrel connector. We typically recommend a product that's known as a Cisco Cube for that connection point. However, all Cyberdata products across the board, every single product, is based on power over Ethernet. So it's most common in my experience dealing with support and just engaging with customers, it's typical for about 95% of the customer base to just use standard power over Ethernet instead of using the external power option. But there is an external power option if required. So then we get to the kind of special child here. So the special option that we have here is what we call the SIP paging zone controller. So this one, as you'll notice in comparison with the paging adapter and paging server, it looks a little different. This one has 4 RCA line out ports, and this one is specifically used for connecting to 4 analog amplifiers that all take an RCA connection point that are all in one central location. A little history on this unit. It was originally created for a university in California where Cyberdata is based. And there were dormitories for the different students that were attending the university. And they were specifically 4 floors with a telecom room in the bottom floor. There was an amplifier that controlled the speaker systems for each of the individual floors, creating 4 potential zones. So they reached out to Cyberdata and requested a product to bring the analog paging system that they had in the dormitory into their new VoIP system. So this product was actually specifically created for that university for this particular use case, where they had 4 amplifiers all in a single telecom room in one location. It's very, very powerful because with this 4 connection points on here, they were able to do they were able to page to all 4 zones simultaneously and individually. The nice thing with this unit is all the zones are selectable via DTMF, or dual tone modular function, I think, or dual tone modular frequency, which is how the button presses are actually decoded. In the old days with analog and standard public telephone networks, they would actually generate a specific tone. Nowadays, they send what's known as a RTP event message. So when you press 1 on your keypad, it actually sends the number 1 has been pressed on the keypad, instead of sending the tone for that particular option. So with the capability of this device receiving DTMF, you can select the particular zones. And since there are 4 zone connection possibilities on here, there's 16 total zones that it can page to. Of course, zones 1, zone 2, zone 3, and 4 individually, and combinations of all of the different zones, including all 4 zones simultaneously. So it's an extremely powerful unit, but it's very limited by its use case. Because, for example, if a customer only has a single amplifier in one location, but they have another amplifier in another location in the same building to control 2 different zones, this product would not be useful, because zone 1 could obviously connect to the very close amplifier, but zone 2 and zone 3 and 4 for that matter, you couldn't run a long cable to zone 2. So it wouldn't be useful in those specific situations. But when you're dealing with amplifiers all in one central location, this is an extremely powerful unit. So next we can get into the IP notification products. So the IP notification products that we have are really 2 different products. We've got the call button option, either the indoor or outdoor version. The indoor part number is 011049. For the outdoor version, we've got 011491. And then we've got our SIP RGB multicolor strobes. And these part numbers for the indoor version are 011376, and the outdoor version is 011479. These are essentially only 2 products, but just put in different cases. We've got the call button in either variety, indoor or outdoor, and then we've got the strobe, and again, either indoor or outdoor. So for our call buttons, these call buttons are basically designed for help and easy notification. So common use cases for these, say for an outdoor unit, it's very useful in a parking lot or outside of a police station or other places where somebody could just need assistance and press the help button. So it can be extremely useful. The nice thing with this unit is once it's registered to the phone system, all you have to do is upload a standard WAV file to the device, and when the button is pressed, it will call a predetermined number or send multicast to a particular configured IP address and port and play the message that's loaded in there. That's all it does. It's a very, very simple unit, but extremely powerful in certain situations. Now for indoor units, there's quite a bit, there's different use cases that you can use for the indoor unit. For example, with factories, say if somebody's building a particular part at a location, instead of having a phone for each individual station, they can have they can have one of the call buttons. And when somebody presses the call button, it says, you know, I need such and such a part at location A. And then the part pullers can go and load up a cart with the parts and take it to the person that needs the parts. It's extremely useful in situations like that. It can also be used in stores for just, say, help in produce, or an older woman needs help getting something off the top shelf in a grocery store. Other uses that we have for these here in the States are they're used very big in the judicial system as emergency buttons. So judges or attorneys will put these underneath their desk, and if they're talking to somebody and giving somebody bad news and they get a little upset and hot and heavy, they get, you know, really rambunctious and angry, they can just discreetly press that button underneath the desk to call security and just call for some assistance. There's a lot of different use cases for it, but again, either unit just takes a standard audio file that's uploaded to it, and it will call a predetermined number when the button is pressed. It's extremely useful in certain situations. So it can do the SIP call and the multicast simultaneous or one or the other. So it can not only send a SIP call to, say, the fire department, the police department, to local security, but it can also send multicast across the network to be picked up by a whole bunch of different products. Say your IP speakers or your loud horns. Very, very useful. So these also, and one thing you'll notice as we go through some of the other products that are this size, they've got an onboard relay terminal on them. And our intercom products have all of the same onboard terminals on there, although I don't know if I have a picture of that in here. We'll see in a moment here. So next, for our IP notification products, we've got the RGB Strobes. Now the nice thing with these strobes is instead of other strobes on the market, like you'll see, that have different lenses and colors that can be used and swapped out manually, where, say, if you want a red strobe, all it's going to blink is red because you've got the red lens over the strobe. With this one, since they use LEDs for RGB, you can go and set the color manually through the web interface, and it can blink multiple different colors. Most useful when you're using multicast, which is a subject we'll tackle a little bit later in more depth. But it's extremely useful because each of the strobes, either indoor or outdoor, can store a variety of different color options, where your emergency color can be red, your general announcements could be green or blue, and then all the colors in between. If you want a pink color or a green color or an orange, what have you, it can blink all of those different colors because the colors are generated by the RGB LEDs. It can also blink white, which is useful here in the States for what we call ADA compliance, or Americans with Disability Act, where strobes specifically need to blink a white color to be in compliance with that. So it's useful here in the States. I'm not sure if it's useful over there in India, but it definitely can do all color patterns as well as white. So these products also have two different SIP extensions on there, both the standard paging extension and the night ringer extension. And we'll cover those types of extensions a little bit later when we get to our speakers and our overhead paging horns. And again, since these are the intercom shaped boards, and it's really determined by the lower board that's actually on the device, they've all got an onboard relay, which can be triggered via DTMF or various options, like activate relay on call or activate relay on multicast. So it's got a lot of capability, and anything with a relay can be, say, tied into a fire panel or another type of strobe, or say even a door for access control. There's a lot you can do with relays. That's almost a whole training session on its own, just to talk of the features and capabilities of relay. So next we get into our IP paging products. So for speakers, we've got a lot of different speakers. To start, we've got both our multicast options. So the multicast options are more of our cheaper speakers because they're a stripped down feature set, so we can sell them at a lower price. And those ones only accept multicast. And for those, we've got two different variants. We've got a wall mount and a ceiling mount. The wall mount mounts on a ball joint and gives you a lot of flexibility for angling and turning the speaker to a particular direction, which makes it very, very useful for indoor situations. However, for big office environments where you don't have a lot of walls and easy access to mount the speakers, a ceiling mount can be a better option. Then we get to more of our full-fledged speakers, our SIP speakers. And these ones support more functionality, including two SIP extensions, both the primary and the night ringer extension, which we'll cover in a little bit more detail momentarily. They can also accept multicast, as well as power an additional speaker, power a clock kit, and other cool devices. So they're very, very useful, but they cost more money because there's more features with them. So for our SIP speakers, they come in two main varieties, either the standard one-way option or a talkback option, which allows full duplex or two-way communication, where you can actually have a full two-way communication with someone. We've also got a specific ceiling tile drop-in speaker, and that speaker is already mounted as in a ceiling tile drop-in tile. So it's useful for offices or schools that actually have a ceiling tile style ceiling. We just recently started putting those in a 2x2 option. So instead of the strange size of a 1x2, they come in a 2x2 now, which is, I believe, 2 feet by 2 feet. Very, very useful in certain situations, but those ones only specifically come with one-way speakers. We are not currently offering those with the talkback option. And finally, we've got our office ringer, which is specifically designed for a quiet, loud ringer in an office environment. So it would be useful for, say, an executive office or someplace where a speaker would be too loud for certain applications. Then next, we've got our horn options. So speakers are typically better for indoor environments just because of the sound generation. And also, speakers are not typically IP66 rated or have any waterproof or weatherproof rating. So speakers aren't typically the best thing to put outdoors because they'll be exposed to the elements and can get damaged from water, dirt, what have you. So that's where horns come in. Horns are more designed to be used in outdoor environments. So we've got four main products in our horns category, although they're all powered by the same unit. So to start, and with my personal favorite for outdoor paging, is what we call our SIP IP66 outdoor horn. That's an all-in-one horn unit. It's really, really easy to mount, and it's extremely powerful, and I think it's the best money for paging coverage ratio in comparison to some of the other products, and we can touch on that in a moment. Then we've got our loudspeaker amplifier products, which come in two main varieties. You can either get the standard paging amplifier on its own, or you can get what we call the paging amplifier in a box, which would be the loudspeaker amplifier, either PoE, which does not come with a PoE injector in the box, where the end customer will be supplying power over Ethernet power, or we've got the AC powered option, which will allow them, if they don't have PoE in that location, a PoE or power over Ethernet injector is included in the box, and all they have to do is connect it to standard AC power. So it's extremely versatile in areas where the PoE or power over Ethernet bandwidth is already exerted by phones and other IP-based products on the network. So first, we'll go through our multicast speakers, pictured here on the left, the wall mount on the top and the ceiling mount on the bottom. So both speakers are, they support multicast only, so they don't have any direct SIP support. So what that means is they cannot be directly called on a phone system, where you can't pick up a phone, dial 123, and call one of these speakers. They do not function like that. They can only receive multicast, and multicast can come from a variety of sources, including the SIP paging server, the multicast microphone, as well as a variety of third-party products, such as most VoIP-capable phones, so VoIP, voice over internet, phones like Yealink, Grandstream, Cisco, many different phones. Most modern phones support multicast out of the box, so they can also page to multicast as well, which makes them very, very powerful. So these speakers are fairly loud. They get a pretty good coverage level. Nowhere near, of course, to the standard speaker, just due to the size. But they're extremely useful for coverage in specific areas where you just need to make a general announcement. Common areas where these will be used are classrooms for students, auditoriums, or cafeterias are great areas for these speakers. Basically places where you will not need to page one of these speakers individually, but they can all receive the page simultaneously and all make noise together. So very, very useful speakers. They're cheaper, and they're great for just kind of adding coverage in areas like hallways, classrooms, cafeterias, where you just need to make that all page scenario to get all of the audio out at once. Then we get into our SIP paging speakers. So these are more of our standard or full-fledged speakers, and with that they come with a lot more capability. We kind of touched on the different varieties that we have earlier, but again, we've got the standard SIP speaker, part number 011394. The difference between the two part numbers you'll see here is we've got the standard option, which is really all we're selling today, the part number 011394, which is the standard white color, and then we've got an off-white color that's available for a certain order quantity. We're not doing these as much anymore, but we're still offering the color palette if customers like it. Although we chose the specific color that they can pick now, that is just the default color, because we sold about 90% of one color and 10% of the other. So we just opted to give everybody that color, and if they wanted the other color, they can just do a special order and we'll custom make them for you. And we've got the talkback option, and same thing with the part numbers. Anytime you see these repeated part numbers like this, they're just going to be two different color options. And of course, we've got the ceiling tile drop-in speaker. So the nice thing with these speakers is they're much, much bigger just in terms of the actual speaker diaphragm itself, so they can be substantially louder. Plus, they also come with multiple different features due to the onboard terminal that we have pictured here on the right-hand side. Some of the nice just physical features you get with the intercom is it's got two status lights. The picture here is kind of small, but it's got both a status and activity light on the right-hand side of the speaker. So you know the speaker is powered, and you can see that the speaker is functioning because the activity light will blink, much like an Ethernet port. It actually mimics an Ethernet port. When you see the activity light blink, you know that the speaker's functioning and sending traffic across the network. Also, it's kind of small in this image here, but we've got a audio wheel here on the front of the speaker. So both of these speakers, the SIP speakers, the more premium speakers, they have two different methods of volume control. You can use either the physical volume wheel to turn up or turn down the audio, just volume-wise, or you can use the web-based audio control, where you can set the volume via the web interface. So situations where you would want to do that is typically schools and classrooms where, at least here in the States, the teenagers are very rambunctious, they like to cause problems, and if there's a wheel that they can mess with on the speaker, they're going to turn that wheel. So it's very, very common here in the States to disable the volume wheel through the web interface, so that way the volume is set only through the web and cannot be manually changed with the volume wheel. So there's a couple different flexibilities that you get there in addition to the onboard terminal here. So with the onboard terminal, to just go over the pinouts that we have, starting from J10 from the top, we've got an auxiliary power option. So if PoE is not available, they can power the speaker with a regular 24-volt DC power adapter that's measured at 1 amp. So it's a pretty low power speaker, but you can power it via other options if PoE is not available at the location. Like common with most Cyberdata products, there's an onboard relay on there, and the onboard relay, of course, can use to trigger a strobe or an emergency notification light, or say if you're not pairing it with a Cyberdata notification device, what we'll commonly refer to as a whirly strobe out here, where it's instead of, say, like our RGB strobe that has LEDs that just illuminate and blink, a whirly strobe has a light that will spin around in it. So it's much, much brighter because it uses a standard incandescent bulb. It can be much, much brighter than just standard LEDs, but are not as commonly used now. They were also used a lot in American films, say on the top of police cars, or other things like that, where you would see a spinning light. That's typically what's known as a whirly strobe. And that's just an example of what you can use to connect these relays to. I've seen that used in quite a few different factories here in the States. Although, frankly, the relay connection points on the speakers are very seldomly used. Then next, here at the bottom, we've got the 5-volt out, as well as the two non-common options here, and then we've got the ground connection. So these 4 pins, the bottom 2 on J10, and then the bottom on J9, and ground here on J9, are all used to connect to our auxiliary button. And this is mainly useful for our talkback speakers, which gives the capability for a user they could come up to one of the talkback speakers and press the attached call button to make a call to a predetermined number. So that way they can actually initiate a call from the speaker. So that can be useful in schools or classrooms where they don't have a physical desk phone to use. They can use the speaker instead. So the nice thing with the speakers, when we're dealing with specifically the talkback variety, there's 4 different modes that the speaker can actually operate in when using it in for full duplex or two-way communication. It can option number 1, it can work like a standard speakerphone. So like on a cell phone, when you press the speaker button and it just amplifies the sound and everybody can talk to it and nobody has to wait, they can talk to it like that. That's option number 1. Option number 2 is what we call push to talk. And there's a couple different varieties of push to talk. So push to talk option that's most commonly used is where the push to talk will be controlled by the accessory button that's attached to the speaker. So the user on the phone side that receives the call from the speaker or calls the speaker on the other hand will be able to talk freely and communicate. And then when the user on the speaker side wishes to talk, they press and hold the accessory button and talk to the speaker. And when they go and press and hold the button, it will physically mute the speaker where no audio can come out of the speaker. So that way they can talk to the user on the phone side. And then when they're finished saying whatever they need to say, they release the button, and then the user on the phone side can be heard through the speaker again. The speaker comes back to playing volume, and the microphone is muted on the speaker. So that's option number 1 for push to talk. Option number 2 is where it's controlled on the phone side. So on the phone side, and this is useful in areas where they didn't opt to get the push to talk button for the speaker. And that can be used by pressing the pound or star key on the keypad of the phone to switch between talk and listen mode. So that way when they're in talk mode, they can talk through the speaker and the audio will come through. And then when they want to listen, they just simply press the pound key, and the speaker will be muted itself actually on the speaker, and the microphone will be engaged, allowing the users on the speaker side to talk to the user on the phone side. And those are the 2 push-to-talk options, either controlled by the speaker with the push-to-talk button or controlled by the phone with the star and pound keys on the phone. So it gives 2 options for those scenarios. Then finally, the 4th option for full duplex or two-way communication with the speakers is what we call Vox mode. And Vox mode is very common with analog talkback speakers, where the user on the phone side has precedence and can talk and be heard by the users on the speaker side. However, when the speaker on the phone side finishes talking, the microphone will then be engaged by the speaker and can pick up what the users around the speaker will say. And this is all controlled by the voice of the user on the phone side. So as soon as the user on the phone side begins talking, it will immediately mute the microphone on the speaker, and what the user on the phone side is saying will actually come through the speaker. So it's useful in areas where you're just needing to make a quick announcement to somebody and then just get notification that they heard it. So common places where this will be used, at least here in the States, is kitchens. It's very, very useful, say if the maitre d' at a restaurant or somebody that's allocating tables or just giving orders to the cooks can call into the speaker and make the announcement, and then once they're finished saying the order to the cooks can say, okay, chef, understood, we'll make that, we'll get that right out to table 3, or what have you. And it's an easy way of notification. And the nice thing for that, for kitchens and cooks, is that there's no physical touch that's necessary from any of the cooks. So that way they can all stay clean and they can just talk to the speaker. They're heard. They don't have to touch anything on the cook side, which is very, very useful to keep from contaminating food that they might be preparing for customers. So the other options that we have for connections on the speakers are both the line out options, and the line out options, both the positive and negative option here, are a 10,000 ohm unbalanced. So they're much like the RCA output of the paging adapter and the paging server. These are very seldomly used. I've seen these used once before by a customer that was using a speaker in their telecom room, one of our IP speakers, and they were using the line out feature to tie into their analog speaker system to be able to make pages through there, where the speaker actually controlled everything. This would not be a way that Cyberdata would recommend the products, because frankly, the speaker is more expensive than one of the strictly IP to analog style devices. However, they had the speakers on hand and it was useful for them and it will work. It's not the ideal and right way to do it, but it will work. The other connection point, and one of the major sellers, and one of the reasons that people will upgrade to the SIP compliant speakers, is the aux speaker support. Now, this option gives the capability of allowing one SIP speaker to control one auxiliary speaker, just with the positive and negative audio connections here. So that gives the extreme capability to reduce cost when pricing different speakers for different locations. Examples of this being used are where there's a male and female bathroom right next to each other, where instead of getting, at least with US prices, two $500 speakers, one for each of the bathrooms, which is $1,000 US, that's a lot of money. Or instead, what they can do is they can spend, $500 on one speaker for one of the bathrooms, and then $75 for the analog speaker that will go in one of the other bathrooms, really, really reducing cost. It's very common to use in, say, bathrooms or other areas where you're only going to be needing to make single zone paging, where you won't need to interface with one of these speakers in particular. So it's very, very useful in certain situations and a great way to offset cost. The nice thing with these options is they do have a 20-foot maximum length from the speaker, so it makes them perfect for hallways or in office environments. You can go, and if someone has large cubicles in one area and then a secluded office over in the corner, they could have the standard SIP speaker out in the cubicle area and then run the wires over to the auxiliary analog speaker that could be in one of the offices. So it's extremely useful for offsetting costs and providing more coverage. There are some accessories for our standard SIP speakers when these are used, because the SIP speakers are sold on their own, where you just get the speaker on its own and you have to mount it. We do, when we sell the products, they do come with drywall compliant screws in there, so they can be mounted directly in the wall. However, that would mean that someone would have to cut a giant circle in their wall to mount the speaker, which in a couple years, if you have to replace the speaker, then you've also got a giant hole in your wall. It's a lot more work than it needs to be. So we typically recommend getting different mounting kits for the speakers. So the different mounting options that we have are the standard wall mount option that I don't have pictured here, but it's very similar to the clock kit option that we have here. So this clock kit is very, very useful for things like common areas, say break rooms at different businesses, classrooms, or auditoriums, where somebody would also not only need to get audio notification, or they need to be able to hear a notification, but also need time. So it's extremely useful in those situations where you need both notification and time. And the nice thing with this is it plugs directly into this small port. It's not pictured here, but there's two screws that you can remove, and there's a connector right underneath this that will plug into the clock kit here. So this becomes an all-in-one unit, and it's all powered by a single PoE drop. So it's extremely, extremely useful. We've also got what's known as a conduit mount. So when you're dealing with, this is more common in industrial shops here in the States. We've got, especially at different high schools, when students are, between 14 and 18, they're in their last few years of school. It's very common to have things like wood shop or metal shop, where they'll use different machines. And commonly in those areas, they will not have standard walls that would permit installing a regular wall mount. So for scenarios like that, we recommend a conduit mount, because it can just use regular metal conduit to actually mount the speakers. So it makes it very useful to mount it on the wall without needing to drill holes in cinder block or other areas where it just would not be possible to install a regular wall mount option. Very, very useful. And of course, we've got our ceiling mount option. So with the ceiling mount option, you can buy just the speaker on its own, and then the ceiling mount, and you can put it in the kit yourself. Or we sell the standalone version, which is one that we in the factory install for you, so that way it just makes it a little bit easier. Other accessories that customers can get are, of course, the auxiliary analog speaker, which we talked about in depth in the last slide. Then we've got, of course, the ceiling tile drop-in version, which is just that same analog speaker, just already put in a drop-in ceiling tile. We've also got an auxiliary strobe kit. The auxiliary strobe kit is a great way to pair both auditory or audio notifications, voice paging, with visual notifications. And these are useful in certain times where you will have a louder environment. So common use cases are schools or with younger children where they can typically be louder. Where a visual notification can be helpful because they might not be able to hear the speaker. So there's a big blinking light on the wall. Typically, most students would quiet down because they realize a page, an announcement is coming through. It's also useful in certain situations. One example that I have here in the States, in the state of Washington, there's a school for deaf children. So the children are not able to hear the announcements from the speaker. So all of the classrooms got fitted with our standard wall mount speaker, as well as the auxiliary strobe kit. And that gave the capability for all of the speakers, when an announcement was made at the school, to blink the strobe that was attached to the speaker, which made the students look up from their work and look to their teacher, who was doing sign language, so that students could still understand what announcement was being made, and they would still be notified of it. So the strobe kit is extremely useful in areas where the normal audio level, or just the normal sound level in the area, would be too loud to hear a regular notification, or useful in areas where people could not actually hear the auditory or the voice notification, the announcement. And finally, we've got the remote call button pictured up here on top. And that's the call button that would be used to initiate a call from one of the talkback speakers. It can be used with a standard one-way speaker. However, it's not useful to initiate a call from a one-way speaker because you can't talk to the person on the other side. So it's not particularly useful to connect to the standard speaker, the standard one-way audio speaker, but it can be connected. I don't know why they would do that, but it can be connected. However, it's predominantly used with our talkback speaker, again, for that push-to-talk or speakerphone style of communication. So important notes on two of the products here for the two accessory points. Mainly to do with the clock kit and the RGB strobe kit. So these two accessories share the same connection point that's illustrated right here underneath this panel. We don't have any good illustrations of this, and I don't have a speaker to take a picture of it. But there's a small little access panel that's illustrated here with just two screws that can be removed, and you get an access point to actually plug in one of the two accessories, either the clock kit or the auxiliary RGB strobe kit. Only one of those two options can be used because the connector is only usable by one of the two connections. So you cannot use one of the clock kit and the strobe kit connected together. You cannot do those two. However, you can do a combination of the call button and the strobe kit, or the call button and the strobe kit, not pictured, or the call button and the clock kit. So it's very, very useful. You can use these two together and the strobe kit together, but you cannot use the clock kit and the strobe kit simultaneously because, again, they share the same connection point. So next, we get to our IP horns. So the horns are all powered by this black box right up here on the top, which we call the SIP paging amplifier. This is the brains behind all of our paging horns. So this one particular unit can control 1 to 2 8-ohm mini horns. So these are specifically designed 8-ohm speakers or horns that are used predominantly in outdoor environments or in areas where they're going to get dirty. So things like different factories or areas where they're going to be exposed to more particulate or other things that would potentially damage a standard speaker. The other nice thing about the loudspeaker amplifier in comparison to one of our standard speakers, the loudspeaker amplifier under normal audio conditions with 2 horns can cover up to about 10,000 square feet of coverage. I should have gotten this in metrics because I'm sure none of you guys know feet and regular yard measurements. Metrics would have definitely been helpful. I'm going to make a note of that for when I do training for people outside of the States. But they're extremely, extremely loud units and very, very useful for paging in factories, warehouses, or outdoor environments. And this particular unit is, like I said, the brains behind all the other products. So we can talk a bit about my particular favorite paging product that we have, which is our IP66 Horn. What we did for this product is we found a speaker-style horn that we could use that was specifically 8 ohms. So what we did is we took the paging amplifier out of its nice little black case here and just took the circuit board and mounted it internally for the IP66 Horn, which makes it very, very easy to mount and install in different scenarios where you're going to be deploying this hardware. Where in comparison to the loudspeaker amplifier, what I typically refer to as the paging amp in a box, that one is it can be louder because with the paging amplifier, this unit can control 1 to 2 8-ohm mini horns, or this unit, the IP66 horn, this is all you get. It cannot power any additional horns, no other accessories. So this unit, the paging amplifier, is much, much louder. Like I said, this one covers about 10,000 square feet. The IP66 horn only covers about 5,000 square feet. So it's about half as loud. But it's much, much easier to install because all you have to do is mount the unit and run a network and power cable to the device, which is just a standard PoE, because all Cyberdata products are powered over Power over Ethernet. It's very, very useful and very, very easy to install. Plus, it's fairly cheap. The MSRP price in the US is $545 US in comparison to the paging amplifier, which I believe is $585, which only comes by itself. Then you have to buy the horns on its own, which are, I think, $86 a piece. Of course, US, which gets very, very expensive, which totals almost, after tax, about $800 for this whole complete unit, whereas this unit is a little over $500 US. And it covers about half, but it's extremely, extremely useful when you factor in installation and running wire. You know, there's a lot of other things to consider when you're installing some of these products. So I typically recommend the IP66 Horn for just about all scenarios, just because it's so easy to install, it's cheap, and it works very well. And personally, I like this unit a lot better because of the sound quality. So as you can tell, you can kind of see this kind of darker image right here in the middle of the speaker grill. That's actually where the speaker diaphragm is. So in comparison with the horns that we'll use for our standard paging amplifier, that uses what's known as a rear entry style horn. And what that means is it's got a very, very small speaker that's about 1 inch in diameter. It's extremely loud. And when a page comes through one of those smaller horns, I wish I had a picture of it here, it bounces around on the inside of the horn, and with that bouncing around is amplified. But it makes the audio sound a little different because of the small size to the speaker that's actually creating the sound. So with that, it makes it a very tinny or high-pitched audio that you get from it, which for me can be extremely hard to understand a male vocal pattern, because the male vocal pattern is typically much more bassy. It's a lot lower than higher pitched. So it can be harder to understand the male vocal pattern when dealing with the standard rear entry horn, which is why I like the IP66 horn, because this one has a much bigger speaker diaphragm. It's 3 or 4 times the actual size. I believe it's 4 inches in diameter, Plus, the shape of the horn is different. So instead of the audio bouncing around inside of the horn before it leaves the horn, this one is just spread out very, very wide, which makes for a lot more of a bassier sound, which makes the male vocal pattern, those deeper vocal ranges, much, much easier to understand. So I personally really, really like this unit for its audio quality, its price, and its range coverage. It's very, very useful. Some of the downsides are there's no accessory support with it. So you buy this unit and that's all you get. There's nothing else you can do with it. It's a very, very powerful unit because it supports both the standard SIP connection for both auditory and paging notification, as well as Night Ringer, and the Night Ringer feature is something that we've talked about quite a bit. We can go ahead and cover that now. So our products, I don't have a slide for that, unfortunately. But all of our products have two different extension types on them. Number one is what you'll commonly see if you've ever used the web interface of any of our products. It's called the primary SIP extension. And the primary SIP extension is used for general voice paging, where you would make an announcement through one of the products. Then there's also the Night Ringer extension. The Night Ringer extension is specifically designed to only ring, where you'll call it and it will only ring. The device will never actually answer the call. So it's extremely useful in things like call groups or ring groups where a call is made into a specific number. We commonly like to say a sales line or say a support line, where somebody calls into a phone number and multiple phones are ringing simultaneously. Well, the IP66 Horn or any Cyberdata product across the board, the speakers, the loudspeaker amplifiers, the IP66 Horn, every single product has both of those features. Even the Strobes have both the standard, the primary SIP extension, and the Night Ringer extension. And again, the Night Ringer extension is best to use in those ring groups for just that additional auditory notification of an incoming call. So when the IP66 Horn, just as an example, is added into the support call queue, when somebody calls in and they need assistance, not only will all the phones ring to let everybody know that there's an incoming call, but the IP66 Horn will also ring. So that way, everyone will hear that there's a call coming in, and as soon as that call is answered, or it goes to voicemail, the IP66 Horn or any of the Cyberdata products that are used in this configuration will stop ringing. So it's very, very useful, again, for things like a support or sales phone number, or very commonly used here in the States at different auto shops, where they'll have one of these horns in each of the different bays where they'll be working on cars. And that way, in the later hours of the day when some of the staff go home, the mechanics can hear a call coming in, and if they're free, go and answer a call. So it's extremely, extremely useful in certain situations. So the paging amplifier we kind of covered in depth here. Oh, here's a great picture of the horn. So as I was mentioning, it's got the very, very small horn. It's actually mounted right here. So when the speaker actually makes noise, it bounces all the way down this little tube right here and then comes out the horn. So the way that bounces around in there, just because of the small size of the speaker, which you can really see here, it fits into this. It's very, very small. It creates a very high-pitched noise, but it's extremely useful and it's very, very loud. Some of the nice features of this product, like you can see here, it's got the strobe connection point. So this one, with a paging amplifier, it's very versatile, where you can connect different accessories to it. We do have the label here for the microphone input. However, a microphone was never designed for one of these products, and unfortunately has just been left on the silk screen. To be clear, these pins 1, 2, 3, and 4 are not used by any Cyberdata product. Unfortunately, it is just a label from an idea that we had years and years ago that was just never taken off. But for the strobe connection, they can just plug in one of our accessory strobe kits, which was one of the accessories from the speakers, that will just plug right here into this little connector. I don't have a picture of this removed, but it's a very, very easy connection on there. It's known as a Molex connection. Very, very simple connection. Some of the other features that the paging amplifier has is, of course, it has an analog volume wheel. But any Cyberdata product that you see that has an analog volume wheel can have the volume adjusted with the wheel, or the wheel can be disabled and the volume can be controlled through the web interface, which means it's auto-provisionable, very, very easy to set up and control remotely. It's also got a 10,000 ohm unbalanced RCA or line out option to connect to different amplifiers, very similar to the RCA line out that we saw on the paging adapter and paging server. It's got a normally open onboard relay to trigger different amplifiers or to be connected to a strobe or a fire panel. Very, very useful, as well as the sense input that we saw on the paging amplifier, or the paging adapter, excuse me. So this one, in that same example, like we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, where this could be connected to a fire panel and somebody pulls a fire alarm, it can trigger the onboard relay on the fire panel, which triggers our sense input, and we play an announcement to say, evacuate the building, everything's on fire. So very, very useful product, very, very versatile, but with all that versatility, it's a little bit more expensive. Then we get to a little bit more in depth of what I like to call the paging amplifier in the box, which is just the loudspeaker amplifiers. So the nice thing about the case that the paging amplifiers come in is it's a NEMA rated IP66 enclosure. So it's fine to put out in the weather, and it's a very sturdy, rugged box. It is made out of plastic, but it's a very, very strong plastic. So it's a very, very good box. I would not have any problem putting any of my personal equipment in one of those boxes and leaving it outside. It's not pictured here because of the way that these pictures were taken, but it's got small little clasps on the side, and you can see right here on the middle line here is it's got a little rubber gasket that goes around here. So it's very hard to see in the image, but it creates a nice seal on there so no water can get in there. Since it's IP66 rated, it can be sprayed down with a hose and will not damage any of the equipment, assuming it was properly sealed and installed. So the two differences between the products, and we spoke about this a little bit earlier, is we've got the loudspeaker amplifier AC powered version, and this one comes with a PoE injector in the box and would just need to be connected, of course, to network connection, but also connected to AC power. So this is useful in areas where they don't have any PoE connection, meaning they don't have any power Ethernet capability on their switch. The switch may not even support power over Ethernet, or they've exhausted the power capabilities of the switch by powering up all their phones. So in that situation, the AC power unit can be very, very useful because all they need to do is plug it into a standard wall connection, and the device will function as expected. Then we've got the PoE variant, or the power over Ethernet variant, which just does not have the included injector in the box. So you get a nice IP66 rated to protect the investment, because again, this amplifier is fairly expensive, and it's always better to protect the environment or protect the investment. So one thing I like to include for these particular products is just to give an idea of how loud these products are. So what we did is we took the loudspeaker amplifier and one of the horns, pictured up here on the top, and we took it out to a baseball field out in Monterey, California, where Cyberdata is based. And we ran some tests just to get an idea of how loud the particular product was in an outdoor environment. So what the engineers did, I didn't get to participate in this because I was working in our support department, but they set up the speaker 15 feet in the air and walked around with a way to measure the distance to be able to determine how far away they could get from the loudspeaker amplifier and still hear it. So just to kind of go over the chart that we have here, this area on the inside marked without the line here, this area on the inside is our normal volume level. So this would be at max volume under normal circumstances, meaning boost is not enabled. However, if boost is enabled, then we get this intelligibility area, where with boost number 3, We can get all the way out here, which at max distance is 772 feet away from the amplifier. But this gives a good idea of how far the sound will travel and still be able to be understood from the horn. And keep in mind, this is only testing with a single horn. If we added a second horn in here, it would be substantially larger. But under normal audio circumstances, we're getting about 591 feet away from the horn, and we're still able to hear it. So it's extremely, extremely loud. So next, to talk a little bit more in depth, of course, about my favorite IP66 horn. So this one, of course, like I mentioned before, is an all-in-one unit where the paging amplifier is actually mounted inside in the unit. And I like to use this picture because it gives a good idea of how big the unit actually is. It's 14 inches by 9 inches, of course, measuring from the bottom of the C bracket. But these two images are specifically why I like to include this particular image set in all of my presentations, because it shows how the device is actually mounted, which none of our product pictures actually illustrate. So on here, there's a giant C bracket which attaches to two big bolts on either side of the horn, which gives great flexibility with the already included the three mounting holes that are already pre-drilled on here, which gives a great capability to, say, install it into a cinder block wall with some lag screws. It's very, very useful for that. Or it can be installed overhead in a factory on a cross member on a big beam or a mezzanine that's going across the top of a building. So it's very, very easy to mount with the three mounting holes that are included on here. Very, very easy to mount. And again, all that's necessary is a single PoE or power over Ethernet cable that's connected to it is all is necessary. So all it has to do is get mounted and get a data and power connection to it, and that's all that needs to be done. However, with all that in simplicity and reduced price, there unfortunately are no accessible or compatible accessories for the device at the current time. There may be some in the future, but I have not heard of any personally. So it's a very, very useful unit. This is, again, my favorite unit just because of how easy it is to install. Just a nice one, since we did the intelligibility testing for the loudspeaker amplifier. I always like to show this one as well. This one is substantially quieter, where on our max volume without boost enabled, we're only at 427 feet. And with boost enabled, we were at 590 feet, which, for any of those of you that have been paying attention, the max distance for the loudspeaker amplifier and one horn is 591 feet under normal audio circumstances. So the max volume output of the IP66 horn can fit inside the standard audio output of the loudspeaker amplifier. So this really shows how much quieter this product is, and frankly, how much louder the loudspeaker amplifier is. But it's much, much cheaper and easier to install. So I really like this unit, regardless of its coverage. It's a very, very good ratio between cost and coverage, which is always something to balance when you're making proposals and recommending products to different customers. Very, very loud, very useful. So next we can get to a little bit more of some of the technical stuff for the products. So across the board, all the Cyberdata products, excluding, of course, the multicast speakers, both the wall mount and the ceiling mount, support SIP. And SIP is Session Initialization Protocol, which is the messaging type that's used specifically to start and end a call in a VoIP network. All of our products support the three different transport methods for this particular protocol, either UDP, TCP, or TLS. Although UDP is still the most commonly used transport protocol. TLS is becoming more and more common as the industry is switching to hosted or cloud VoIP. So TLS is more of a request, but we do support all three transport protocols. Across the board, all of the products also support multicast. And if you're unfamiliar with multicast, multicast is a specific range of IP addresses between 224 239.0.0.1 through 239.255.255.255. And these addresses are specifically reserved for use by Multicast. And Multicast is a protocol that allows a single device to send audio to multiple devices simultaneously with only a single stream of audio. So it's extremely useful in areas where you're trying to page to multiple phones or IP speakers. Instead of doing SIP calls to all of those particular devices. Because a SIP call, a standard phone call, is typically a one-to-one call, whereas a multicast can be a one-to-many call. And the nice thing with multicast is there's really no limit to how many devices can actually receive multicast. They're really limited by the subnet mask that's used on the particular network LAN or the local area network. Mainly limited by how many IP addresses can be on that network segment. So if they're using a small subnet mask that really restricts the number of IP addresses that can be on the network, only a few devices will be able to receive multicast. However, if they're using a very open subnet mask, say 255.0.0.0, that gives them potentially thousands of devices that could all receive multicast from a single device. So it makes it extremely, extremely useful as you expand the capability of the network. All of our devices support HTTP or HTTPS for the web connection, although HTTPS is commonly negotiated and it can be disabled, but HTTPS is the default for the products. For provisioning, which is the device on boot, when the device is first plugged in and it boots up, it can actually grab its configuration file from a server on the network. It's very useful for doing big deployments of equipment simultaneously, where, say, if a school is deploying 100 speakers, it's much easier to create configuration files and store them all on a server instead of logging into each individual speaker and setting them up manually. So provisioning is very useful when you're setting up multiple devices simultaneously. And for provisioning, we support 3 different methods of that, which is TFTP, which is Trivial File Transport Protocol. Then we've got HTTP and HTTPS for provisioning. So HTTP is just a standard web request, and then HTTPS would use some kind of authentication. And the 2 authentication types that can be used for HTTPS are either digest authentication, where a username and password will be given to the device to authenticate it to the server, or a certificate can also be used for device-based authentication, where they confirm the server is actually the server. So some helpful troubleshooting tips for the products. Say if there's any, we've got a variety of different test features on the different devices. So any of the speakers, any device that can produce audio, has the test audio function. And all of these test buttons are going to reside on the device tab of the web interface. So the test audio button will play a pre-recorded and stored locally on the device test message. And this test message says, "This is the Cyberdata IP speaker test message." And it's a good way to confirm that the audio device is producing audio. So if there's a speaker that might not be producing audio, say if it was receiving multicast from a paging server or from a phone, and it wasn't playing the audio, I would, of course, first confirm that the device can play audio. So I would run the test audio message to make sure the speaker works. This is also useful when you're dealing with, say, the paging adapter or paging server, and you're connecting to an analog amplifier. Again, either product, either if it has an onboard speaker or does not, and is one of our IP to analog devices, it will play the audio file. And when you're dealing with the IP to analog devices, of course, since they don't have a speaker, the audio comes out either of the line out connections, either the tip and ring audio connection or the RCA line out option. So no matter how the device is connected to one of the analog amplifiers, the test message will come through that connection point. Then we've got our test relay function, and that will trigger the onboard relay for 3 seconds. And that's useful if, say, the relay is connecting to different devices, say a fire panel or a strobe, and you just want to make sure that the connection works and the device will, the device that the Cyberdata device is connected to, so a strobe or a fire panel, will take an appropriate action based on that relay contact closure. So it's really a good way to make sure that that test connection has worked. Although the test relay function is mostly used on our intercom products, which we can talk way more in depth about in our next training session that we'll do probably next week, although we can try to organize that later this evening or tomorrow. Then finally, we've got our test multicast feature. And the test multicast feature is only on products that can send multicast. So this would be on the paging server or the call buttons, and the multicast microphone. And what this does is it sends the standard test audio message, so that this is the Cyberdata IP speaker test message. Instead of playing it through either a physical way on the device, either through the test audio message or through the physical outputs, it actually sends it back across the network as multicast to a predetermined multicast address and port. So this is useful if you're trying to determine if there are any switches or gateways or firewalls involved in the traffic path for multicast to be received. It's very, very useful to troubleshoot speakers during setup, or if trying to determine if a speaker has connection and can receive multicast from the source device. So there's very, very useful troubleshooting capability built into any of the products. And one final thing that I don't have mentioned on here for troubleshooting tips is the reset to factory mode button, which is on just about every Cyberdata product. On the speakers, there's a small access hole right next to the volume wheel, which can allow someone to press the reset to factory mode button either with a paper clip or a ballpoint pen. And the button is actually multifunctional. If the button is pressed for about 1 to 2 seconds, the device will announce its IP address. So that's very useful in initial configuration where you plug the device into a switch and you've still got physical access to the device after the device is done booting. You just press the button and the device will literally read its IP address to you. It'll tell you, your IP address is 10.1.0. It will actually read the IP address. The second function for the button is if the button is held for about 8 to 10 seconds, where it will actually factory restore to the device or restore to factory mode the device. So it's very, very useful if the direct connection to the device is lost, or say the password was changed and the device can no longer be accessed. You would want to use the reset to factory mode button to actually restore defaults to the unit to be able to gain access to it. So that's another useful troubleshooting feature on there. So if you don't have access to the web interface, you can check that the device has network connection and the audio path is working by using the short RTFM feature, or reset to factory mode feature, where you press to 1 to 2 seconds and it will state its IP address. That tells you, 1, that it has a network connection, and 2, that the audio output is working. And it can also be used to restore factory defaults if you lose connection to the device. So then finally, this is our last slide here, and then we can get to some questions because I'm sure we have some, are helpful resources that Cyberdata has. So on our website, under support, we've got both the connecting to compatible IP PBX servers and connecting to compatible analog amplifiers. So what I do in my job as the interoperability manager at Cyberdata, not only do I do a lot of technical training on the products, but I also write documentation on our products for different phone systems. So for most phone systems that we've done what's known as interoperability testing, where we just test and confirm that the device will work on a particular phone system, I'll write documentation to set up the product on that particular phone system. So it's a very, very useful guide if you're setting up the product on a particular phone system and you're not certain on how the configuration should go. We may or may not have a configuration guide on the website that can walk through that process. So it's an extremely useful resource on there, as well as the analog amplifier compatibility. So that one, we've actually got nice diagrams for connecting to different analog amplifiers that we've encountered here in the States. And these are anything from Valcom to Bogan amplifiers, to even some older ones that were produced, gosh, back in the 80s, a company called Duquesne. So we're always encountering different analog amplifiers through the sales department, and the sales department will reach out to me and the rest of the tech support team to determine the connection capabilities of the different amplifiers. And if we can connect to the amplifier, we'll do a nice drawn up image that shows the connection point on the amplifier and nice colored lines between the connecting device, either the paging adapter or the paging server, to that particular amplifier, as well as any necessary dip switch settings or anything else that would need to be changed on the particular amplifier. So those are really, really helpful guides when you're assisting a customer trying to determine how to connect to a device, or if you're troubleshooting connecting to an amplifier. It's very useful to confirm that the connection has been done properly, and we may or may not have a guide available for that. So then next we have our support department. Now, our support department will probably be hard to get a hold of on the phone, just based on the time zone difference, because they are available from Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So it could make it a little difficult to get the support team on available, but we do have a ticket-based email system that I would recommend using for some of our customers and clients that are on the other side of the planet. It's very common. I'm sure a lot of you have probably worked with our support department. The ticketing option is a really, really great option to correspond with the support team. They're very responsive. They typically have a response out within 24 hours of the initial ticket submission, and that 24 hours is the maximum worst case scenario. Typically, it's within a couple hours of the ticket submission. The support department is extremely helpful. We've got a total of 4 people in the support department. We've got 2 lower tier techs, and then a tier 2, and then I am the tier 3 technical support. So with technical support, you're definitely in good hands. You can end up working with me or some of the other very qualified technical people. They're very, very helpful and good at troubleshooting different problems. They're available by chat, of course, during the regular business hours, by phone, or what's most commonly used is both email through ticket. So to reach the support department, it's just support.cyberdata.net, or you can reach that through the support tab on the Cyberdata website, or by phone at 831-373-2601, extension 333. So that will actually conclude our presentation today. One thing that I would like to show, just because we kind of covered that in such depth, is just a good example here on the Cyberdata website of just one of the connection diagrams that I was talking about, because I like to really demonstrate these connection diagrams. And we can pick, let's do this Bogan TPU here. This is a very common amplifier that we'll work with. But this is just a good example of some of the connection diagrams and the level of quality that you'll get when you're referring to one of these from Cyberdata. So this shows the connection capabilities between the Bogan TPU 35 watt, 60 watt, 100 watt, or 250 watt amplifiers, and this is specifically connecting to the SIP paging adapter. So for this connection, we're using pins 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 from the paging adapter, all colored red, blue, green, or red, blue, black, green, and yellow, where red, blue, and black are audio connections. Of course, pin 3 and 4 being our positive and negative audio. We've got our ground connection, and then we've got our relay connection points. So our audio connections go to the tel input, which is both the tip and ring connection, as well as the ground connection. And then the relay contact closure goes to the music mute feature, because this amplifier not only takes audio input, but also music in. So this gives the capability to mute the overhead music that's being played to play the audio. So this is just a good example of the level of quality of a connection diagram that you would get from us. And one final thing, just to kind of show off the guides that I do, just to give you an idea of what we do have on here. We've got guides for a lot of different providers out here, and we're always trying to expand some of the providers that we'll encounter from Asia. One of the common ones that we have down here is Zyku. They're a fairly large Chinese PBX company, very, very good, and very, very cost effective. I was blown away at how cheap this equipment is, but very, very powerful units. But we've got a long list of guides for different providers out there. Cisco's another big one where we've got that broken off into a lot of different sections for all the Cisco stuff. But there's a huge level of documentation that's available on our website to assist in any configuration or problems that you'll run into. And at that point, this actually concludes my training. We've kind of covered everything that I wanted to cover. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, Paul, you should go to the chat window. You have a chat window, and you will find some questions there. Okay.
I see that. Okay. Yeah, my apologies, everyone. I didn't realize there were chats coming through in the meeting. I was just kind of sitting there talking. Let's see. Use case of the onboard relay for SIP notification. So the onboard relay for the SIP notification products, we can go to, one thing is this will be nice, so we can actually go through the website here and I can show you different examples. So for the onboard relay use case for one of our IP notification products, and for this instance, we'll just pick the RGB Strobe. In our installation tab, we've got different options on here that show, see, do we actually have anything that's shown? Okay, no real use cases for that. Use cases, it can be hard to determine a particular use case for a relay because all a relay does is close and it can be connected to another device. So common examples, I know I use the example a lot, is a fire panel, where we can connect to a fire panel and trigger an emergency, or we can be connected to a security panel and allow entry to a entry to a business. There's a lot you can do with an onboard relay, and unfortunately, it's kind of an open-ended thing, and it's hard to explain that one. So let's see. Next question here. Explain the use case of the office ringer. Oh, of course. So the office ringer, that's one I didn't touch on. Thank you for that. So the office ringer we have down here. This one, as you can kind of tell from this image here, it's a very, very small unit. It's the same size as our intercom products. It actually uses the same speaker for an intercom. So it's only about, I think it's a 2.5 inch in diameter speaker. So it's very, very quiet. So it's useful in quiet areas or in particular executive offices if you wouldn't have a dedicated speaker that would be used. So it's very, very useful for loud ringing or one-way communication, where you just need to make an announcement. It's effectively a small speaker is the best way to put it. It's just a smaller version of a speaker.
Is it a one-way communication or a bidirectional? Because I can see a mic icon also on the photograph picture.
Oh yeah, so this one. Let me see if we can zoom in. Yeah, the image just kind of scales. So that's actually, it's just, this is kind of this is a ringer notification. There's actually no access port, because let me show you here. This one actually uses, it's very similar to this unit here, which would be our two-way communication intercom. As you can tell, they look exactly the same. The small little star pattern down here at the bottom left corner is actually the microphone. So with the office ringer, there's no microphone included, so it's just one-way audio. If you wanted a two-way audio device, it would be one of the intercoms. And the intercoms, honestly, on their own, are a whole nother 2-hour training session that we would have to go through. That is a lot of information for the intercoms. We'll do that, because I want to be able to not, one, keep you guys for 4 hours going over everything, and that way we can really laser focus on the particular technical aspects of the products. So for, let's see, tell me a way that we can play a playlist of music through paging speakers. Is there any way to connect to add a music playlist? Great question. Great question. This is very common. So for that, either with the paging server or the paging adapter, you would want to use, and we don't have a, oh, this is a good cut sheet here diagram, where your music source, and this can be an MP3 player, a standard stereo, a radio, can just be fed into the line-in port connection on the paging adapter or the paging server. Now with the paging adapter, this unit can only play the audio out its two connection outputs, either the RCA line out or the page port connection to an amplifier. But if we go over to the paging server, since this one is a SIP2 multicast out style device, this one can actually send the audio, the background music, as multicast across the network. So not only can the audio go to the IP to analog, it can go straight out the analog equipment, but that same background music can go back across the network as multicast to any Cyberdata product or any phone that supports multicast. So it can go to a speaker, it can go to a horn, and actually play the music there. So it really only depends on what you actually have that can connect to the paging server. You just need to get an RCA connection, and you can plug it into the paging server or paging adapter and have that background music be played through the facility. Okay, let's see. So we got that one.
Yeah, there is a very important question which generally every buyer in India asks, that what is the wattage output of a horn, SIP horn speaker or SIP door intercom, intercom. But we generally on the spec sheet we have units in dBc or dBm, but not in wattage. Any specific calculator where we can change it in wattage?
Let's see. That's we commonly don't give stuff in wattage because wattage is typically used for analog speakers where they'll receive a particular wattage and can be powered by that particular wattage. But with our speakers, you're typically dealing with the audio output that can be created by the speaker, which is why we give it in the audio output just in decibels, which is hard to equate, but a general ambient audio level is about 65 to 70 decibels. And the output frequency here at 100 decibels, that is fairly loud. For an equivalence, gosh, I think a jet engine, I think, is like 150 decibels. So it's these things are pretty loud. But I can definitely inquire, because that is definitely a common question that we get, is wattage capability. So I can get back to you on that one. That's not an answer I have today. But we commonly, like you said, we always give stuff in decibels, which is can be a little bit more useful depending on the use case. And of course, if you understand the decibel factor of it. One of the reasons that we measure everything in this way is we wanted to be a little bit more scientific with it, because we actually have one of our software engineers has a master's degree in physics. So we have him do all the specific audio testing. And we wanted to make sure to measure stuff in the most scientific way possible to be able to really present what the speaker can do. So for all of the measurements that you see for the decibel rating, it's actually measured at 1 meter away with what's known as a 1 kilohertz tone, which just generally gives you the idea of how much air the speaker can move when it plays that particular tone. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay, fine. You come back to us, and then when you were showing us the PBX, IP-PBX compatibility, I saw Zoom also. Zoom is a cloud video conferencing?
Yes, but they actually have a phone system now. This is relatively recent. They've got, I'm not sure if they offer it worldwide yet, but I know they do offer it here in the States. But it's a standard PBX compatibility. I actually use Zoom for my, because I work remote from Cyberdata, I actually use it for my phone system here in the States. But they actually have not only the video conferencing capability, but you have standard PBX capability that gets built into it, where you can register a whole bunch of different phones to it. You get different extension numbers. Extremely useful. It's a very, very good service. I can speak with somebody that's been using it for about 8 months now. Very, very good service. No complaints whatsoever. The price is fairly competitive online with most other hosted providers. But yeah, as strange as it sounds, Zoom actually does have a standard phone system.
Okay, there was another smart question sent by an engineer. He's asking, can the night ringer option used in a condition when after few rings, can it go on an auto mode? And can you read that question? The third question.
The last question. Oh yeah. Let's see. The last question I have on my end is the integration with Zoom. Let's
Third
see.
last.
Oh, can the night ringer? Oh, this question here. Yeah. Can the night ringer option be used in condition with calls when the call comes from the speaker from 5 to 7 seconds and then go to auto answer mode automatically? Oh, great question. Great question. Unfortunately, not. No, the night ringer extension, the way that it works underneath the hood in the actual code is that's actually a separate version of our code base that's running. So on all of our devices, they actually run Linux, and then they run our application on top of that Linux. And what's actually running is it's a second version of our call application. And what that call application does specifically for the night ringer is it moves to the 180 ringing state, which is a particular SIP message that's generated that indicates that a ring is generated. And unfortunately, that one actually just sticks and will only stay at that 180 ringing point. The rest of the call stack progression, where it would actually send what's known as a 200 OK to actually join the call, cannot be generated by that particular extension. So directly with the hardware itself, it is not capable to do that. However, you could do that through your phone system. There's different capabilities of the phone system where you can set, and it depends on the phone system that's being used, but after a call has rung a certain amount of times, you can have it take a couple options where it could say forward to a voicemail or forward to a different extension. So for this particular use case where you would want it to ring for 5 to 7 seconds and then automatically go to an auto answer mode, what I would do personally is I would have that call go to a ring group that includes, a couple other phones so that somebody could grab it quickly. And if no one answers the call with that 5 to 7 seconds, have the phone system route the call to the paging extension or the primary SIP extension of the loudspeaker horn or the speaker or any of the products, which will facilitate and essentially recreate that capability of it going into auto answer mode where it's all handled by the PBX, where actually two different extensions are being used. For the first 5 to 7 seconds, it's only dealing with the night ringer. Then the PBX, the phone system, redirects the call to the other extension for full duplex and full two-way communication. Does that make sense?
Yeah, fine.
Skype ID of the support department. That was one that I know that I've got one. I think I'm P Tuttle at cyberdata.net. Yeah, I'll have to check with that and see if the rest of the support department has one of those. But we definitely do have Skype. I'll get back to you on that one. That's another action item I'll have for you guys. I'll have that. It'll be, but I might be able to get it to you today, your time. Yeah, it'll probably be evening time for you guys because the support department doesn't become active until 8 p.m. Pacific tomorrow, so that would be, 10 hours from now? Yeah, you guys might not be active. So I can definitely get that information for you tomorrow. I can put that as an action item for the support department.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. So nice of you for
absolutely.
giving us time. Okay.
Absolutely.
The next training program, we will write you an email because I want you to cover the Bell scheduler as well as the web user interface of all the products what you have trained us today. Okay, the user interface.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a good plan. That's a good follow-up plan. So we kind of covered the general idea. You all have an idea of how the products work, and then we can go through actual configuration. What I can do is I can also have a couple products live here on my desk, and we can go through them and actually set them up on different platforms. We can explain different settings, and of course the Bell scheduler, because that one on its own is almost a whole other training session, as complicated as that thing can be.
So Rajesh will write you an email, and based on your convenience, you come back to us when you intend to do the second part of this, what we spoke. And then third, we will follow it up similarly for our SIP intercoms, okay?
Perfect. That works for me. And really, thank you everybody for your time today. I really appreciate all of your attention. This is, quite a way to spend your Friday morning. I hope it was useful for all of you. I hope you learned something, and we'll definitely be covering a lot more information in our next training sessions. You guys will get sick of me after hearing from me from so much.
No, we love you. Don't worry. We don't get sick. we like everything what you spoke. It was a learning session for the sales people as well, pre-sales people also. If I would have been actually knowing it's more of a pre-sales, I would have invited my sales team also. Currently, it was only engineers. We have around 20 people more in from the sales side. Nevertheless,
Sure.
we will definitely throw this recording to them all. Thank you very much for all the efforts you put in. And Rajesh will come back to you for the next session. Thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day and a good weekend.
Thank you, friends. Thank you.